It's your Friday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to have you guys back. Last show of the week. Good stuff coming up. Chris Hine covers the Wolves for the Star Tribune. Will join me here in just a few minutes, talking Cat's return, talking what this team needs to do down the stretch to get into the postseason. 8 games left, a lot of them really important. Every one of them will be important in certain ways, but a lot of them having the utmost importance because against teams they are battling for playoff position in the West, including their next game Sunday against Golden State, that in California. So Chris and I will break that all down. Really good story by Chris today, by the way, in the Star Tribune and online about Karl-Anthony Towns and kind of the road to his return and what that entailed. So go check that out if you get a chance. Have some Minnesota Wild thoughts at the end of the show. Got some thoughts here on some NCAA tournaments. Let's start with the Vikings just for a minute here, because I thought it was an interesting and surprising move on Thursday. And maybe I didn't know kind of what to expect with this, and I just made an assumption that the Vikings felt a certain way about Duke Shelley that I did. I thought Duke Shelley, cornerback for the Vikings, was a very good player last year, and I don't care that he kind of came out of obscurity. I don't care that he wasn't, didn't have this pedigree. He was a good player. He made some big plays for them last year. He made a big play against Buffalo that kept him in that Buffalo game, kind of got them to the finish line with it, allowed them to intercept that last pass, knocked a pass down. He had I think he was one of their most reliable cover corners, if not their most reliable cover corner. Just kind of reading the stats on him. Last year, allowed a 60.9 passer rating when targeted, according to Pro Football Focus. That was the best on the team. But he signs with the Raiders. Now, the Vikings still have some corners under contract. Byron Murphy, Andrew Booth Jr., Caleb Evans, probably their top 3 at this point. And obviously, they're still in the mix to add some in the draft and through free agency. But I thought Duke Shelley was a pretty easy, low-leverage move to make. A guy that played well for you last season, a guy that has got a decent amount of upside. He's only 26, probably didn't command a massive contract from the Raiders, although I don't see terms listed here anywhere. Surprised me that they let him walk. Surprised me that they didn't bring him back as someone they know. And again, maybe they saw something. They thought it was a small sample size that wasn't going to be replicated. I don't know what it was, but I was surprised the Vikings let Duke Shelley go. That they let him get out of the building and go to the Raiders, go to Vegas. So I'm curious to see what they're doing at that spot. What defensive coordinator Brian Flores has in mind here, because again, they don't have a lot of depth at corner right now at all. Patrick Peterson left, Duke Shelley's gone. I mean, those are the 2 guys I trusted the most last year. I like the addition of Byron Murphy, but he's had some injury problems. I think Caleb Evans is interesting, but he had concussion problems last year. Same with Andrew Booth Jr. I mean, those guys are all injury prone, at least in the past. So what's going to happen at that spot this season? Is this going to feel more and more like a rebuilding season as time goes on if we don't see more moves made, especially at some of these key spots like wide receiver, like corner? And I know it's still late March. They've got lots of time to add to the roster. They've got lots of time still, again, with the draft and free agency. But Duke Shelley was a surprise to me. I thought they would do more there to keep him in the building. Gopher men's hockey team got a little bit of a scare in the first round of the NCAA tournament. They're the number 1 overall seed, playing 16th seeded Canisius, the 4th seed in the region, 16, the last seed into the tournament overall. Gophers were down in this game 2-1 for a little while in the second period. They got a couple goals towards the end of the period to go into the third, 3-2, and then poured it on in the third to win 9-2. So in the end, it didn't look like much of a nail biter at all, but there was some tension building there. People, looking at that, thinking, I think Randy Johnson even wrote it in his game story, thinking, is this another Holy Cross? That huge upset when they lost to Holy Cross back, several years ago in the first round of the tournament. Eerily similar circumstances, both of those being in North Dakota. This one in Fargo, the other one in Grand Forks, but they do prevail and prevail pretty easily, and that's what good teams do, right? Casey Hankinson on Thursday's show kind of talking about what teams need to do when there's pressure, and I'm sure they were feeling a little bit of pressure in that game, but if they were able to not only withstand it, but really turn this game into something where there was plenty of breathing room by the end, and that level of comfort by the end, that they didn't just sneak past 4-3 and have to really sweat at the end. That is the mark of a really good team. They did not, once they got their footing, they did not mess around in this game. And that was pretty important. So they advance. They play St. Cloud State in the region final, and that should be a heck of a game. Two great Minnesota teams right now for the right to advance to the Frozen Four. So that will be one to watch this weekend. I'm looking forward to watching that one for sure. And we'll see. We'll see if this number one overall seeded Gophers team can get back to the Frozen Four for the second consecutive year. NCAA men's basketball tournament. I have not spent much time on this tournament at all. I have not watched much of the tournament at all. I'm just not that into college basketball. I've told you guys that, and no gripes if you are. More power to you. I just haven't spent much time with that, but I just had to take note. The Big Ten's final team eliminated already. Michigan State going down to Kansas State. Great, epic game. Again, I didn't watch a minute of it. I'm told it was great. I hope you guys watched it because it sounds like it was really good. Just not into the tournament right now, but I am into, whenever I pick a bracket, I'm always into not picking Big Ten teams. That's the one thing you should know to do. Don't pick a Big Ten team in the men's basketball tournament because the conference is mediocre. Makes the Gophers 2-17 record in this conference even worse right now. To look at that and say this conference did not have an elite team, did not have a great team. They had a number one seed, Purdue. They lost right away. So just a note. This conference has got a lot of work to do. And again, it was a great game. I get it. They could have gone either way. Michigan State could have got to the Elite Eight, but they didn't. No Big Ten teams in the Elite Eight. Certainly no Big Ten teams going to be in the Final Four, given that fact. Just another year that the conference underachieved. And I don't even know if we can call it underachieving anymore. They're just not that good. They're just not that good.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
All right, Chris Hine and I just talked for like 10 minutes about all the good stuff. Now we're going to start the segment. Now we're going to bring a lot of that to you as well. Chris, of course, covers the Timberwolves for the Star Tribune. Tons to get into with this team right now, Chris. 8 games left in the regular season. A huge game on Wednesday saw the return of Karl-Anthony Towns. He makes the game-winning free throws with 3 seconds left to give them that 125-124 win over Atlanta. Very important win, I would say, in the context of their season. They're now 37-37. The West is still just jam-packed. Like every night there seems to be a different kind of shift in the standings. But, right now, feeling like they're in decent shape. I want to get into some bigger picture stuff in a minute, but tell me a little bit more about Cat's return, the lead up to it, and what it was like on Wednesday night.
For I think the last week, we had been hearing that he was close, very close. I think Chris Finch said very, very close at one point. So it was all circling to Wednesday night. And I think the big question that everybody had was just what was this going to look like? Was he going to play a full complement of minutes? Who was he going to play with? And it was actually quite different from what we saw earlier in the season. We saw basically the Wolves played with 2 bigs on the floor, whether it was Towns, Gobert, Reed. 2 of those 3 seemed to be on the floor at all times, pretty much,
yes,
last night. And that was different than what they had earlier in the season, which was Towns and Gobert would play with each other and Naz Reid would be kind of off to the side, and maybe not even playing that particular night. So very different in terms of lineups. Cat looked, I thought, better than I think I expected him to look.
Yeah, I agree.
He came out, hit 2 threes early on. They seemed to kind of break up his shifts a little bit. He didn't really play too many long shifts. So you definitely saw a concerted effort there to maybe limit the amount of run he gets at one time, because there are times where he'll play like a whole quarter typically in the span of a game. I think it's usually I want to say maybe it's the whole first quarter, the whole second quarter, one of those, but he wasn't doing that last night. So they're breaking up his shifts. He played a fewer minutes than he normally plays. I think he was in the high 20s at the end of the night. He usually plays mid 30s. So a little bit lower minute count than he's accustomed to seeing. But, when the game was on the line, they give him the ball, and in his first game back, and that tells you basically all you need to know about where they think he is right now, which is it's pretty much back to full throttle for him. The acclimation process or ramp up or whatever. Nope. Last night was get out there and you got the ball in your hands with 7 seconds left and we're down 1. So he, in my mind, he looked pretty good. And I think the defense is going to be a work in progress. I think we saw that last night. He admitted as much as well that he's got to get reaccustomed to how they're playing defensively.
Sure.
Now, is there enough time to master that? That I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, it seems like that's the gamble they're making right now, because Finch said after Wednesday's game, essentially, like this, the two big lineup is something they're going to they want to do in large part the rest of the season. That they're getting too many good offensive looks in that kind of setup not to do that. But of course, the consequence of that, sometimes we saw it against the Knicks. I mean, Julius Randle had 57 points and the Wolves still won that game. And, the Hawks put up 124 the other night. The Wolves just happened to have one more. I mean, the consequence sometimes is guys are going to make threes on you. You're just not going to have the lineup that can scramble and get to shooters or get into driving lanes and things like that. But it seems like that's the gamble they're willing to take right now, is that they're going to have enough offense to counter any lapses in defense, right?
I think so. And, like I said, as Karl gets reaccustomed to what they're doing schematically, I don't know how long that process is going to take. Playing with new teammates like Mike Conley as well. That was his first game playing with Mike Conley last night. I think they still have the capability to be a decent defensive team. I don't think you are necessarily just saying we're going to be a bad defensive team now. I don't think that's the case. They still have some very talented defensive players out there in Jaden McDaniels and Rudy, and then Ant when he comes back in terms of his on-ball defense. And I think you saw some of that in the fourth quarter last night. That unit that was out there to get them back in the game when they were down 11. Karl wasn't out there for that one, but it was Rudy and Nas were on the floor together during that time, along with Taurean Prince, Jaden, and I believe Kyle Anderson. Was that 5-man lineup, and they got enough stops to erase an 11-point lead and 11-point deficit and turn into a 5-point lead or 6-point lead, or so that was, they could still play great defense and very good defense in spurts. It's all about just knowing what coverages they're in, because they're going to be toggling back and forth a little bit depending on whether Rudy is out there or not. And just, having that muscle memory and those instincts to not really have to think about where you need to be or what you need to do. And I think that's going to be what Karl's got to fight through, at least in the first couple of games here. Now, I'll be interested to see how this looks against Golden State on Sunday, because when Golden State played them and Rudy and Karl were in the lineup, Golden State ran them off the floor that particular day. So Sunday's game is going to be a big test for them defensively, and we'll see just how much work needs to be done. I feel like Golden State will lay that bare on Sunday. Well,
and that's kind of been the question all year, even when Cat was out, and even in the beginning of the year was, with Rudy on the floor, you do have some challenges when a team goes small, and I think Sacramento stresses them in a certain way. And we'll find that out in that game right after the Golden State game. Phoenix will probably stress them in a certain way. I mean, it's kind of weird. They've got these 3 off days, then they've got 4 games in a 6-day span, including some back-to-backs, back-to-back, and that 3-game road trip. Before I get to that and some of the particulars of that, Ant warmed up a little bit before Wednesday's game. He's probably lobbying to play at some point, because he's always going to say he wants to play. What's your sense on his timetable at this point?
Yeah, hard to put a definitive day on it, but it certainly seems to be tracking in the right direction. Monday he wasn't in warm-up gear when I saw him in the locker room in New York, but yesterday he was, and he was going through some on-court workouts. So that seemed to be a step in the right direction, whereas he wasn't really working out much prior to Wednesday. So I think progressing in the right direction. We'll see if he's playing at all on this road trip coming up. I'm not sure if they know for sure, but we'll see after 3 days off here if that ankle gets gets much better in that time frame. But certainly compared to where it was a week ago when he was writhing in pain on the floor in Chicago, it certainly looks a lot better than it did in that moment.
In terms of the standings, let's go micro first and then macro. I mean, this Golden State game feels awfully big. You win this game, you've got a chance to have the tiebreaker over Golden State. You lose this game, Golden State's got the season series tiebreaker, so that's said and done. They're one game behind Golden State right now, I believe, in the standings, so you're kind of looking up at them right now. I'm sure Golden State might play somewhere in there. Golden State, really good home team, 29-7 at home compared to 9-29 on the road, so a big task at hand to try to win a game in Golden State, but it does feel like that one, if you win that one, I like your chances a lot better of even competing for top 6. If you don't win that one, it's not like all hope is lost, but it does feel like this one has a swing potential to it. In fact, I believe the importance value on the 538 site is 94. It's got a 94 importance score, which you don't see very often.
I am not familiar with the importance score. Can you give me a quick rundown of that?
I think it's basically like on a scale of 100, like what does this game mean in the context of the standings in terms of who wins, how much will this influence them? I think the Clippers-Pelicans game in a couple days is like a 99 because it's got a big swing potential. But, a lot of these West games when it's opponents that are head-to-head in the standings will have those high values. Now, this one's one that definitely has a high value.
Okay. Well, yeah, absolutely. You win this and you're probably in the 6th seed after it. This road trip, I mean, Golden State, Sacramento, and Phoenix, 3 teams that they are looking up at in the standings this year. And if this Wolves team has shown anything this year, it's that they tend to lose when you expect them to win, and sometimes they win when you expect them to lose.
Yes.
So maybe these 3 matchups play into their hands a little bit for them to surprise. They went out west a couple weeks back and had a really good road trip, including a win over Sacramento on the tail end of a back-to-back,
right?
Much like they're going to have to do again on Monday. Phoenix, we'll see kind of what they look like at that point. What's going on with Kevin Durant. Does Josh Okogie cool down from the massive heater that he's been on over the last month or however long that is?
Josh Okogie revenge game, baby.
Right. So we'll see. Winnable games on this road trip, but 2-1 is not out of the realm of possibility, but neither is 0-3.
Yeah.
And it's just the way of life for this team. I have no idea what to expect.
No, we don't. And that makes this question a little tougher, but we were talking before the segment started, and it reminded me, I got an email from Shane Albrecht last week he said, I had an idea for daily delivery. Give your estimated number of games for the Wolves and or Wild to make the playoffs. At that point, the Wolves had like 12 games left, I think. So they have 8 games left now. We're just going to do the Wolves. I'm not going to ask you about the Wild. I can ask Sarah McClellan about that another time. But how many games do you think they need to win to feel good about, play in versus at least that 7-8 play in versus top 6 and things like that?
Man, it's so jumbled right now that it's hard to say for sure, right?
Yeah.
I think if you get to 41-41, that feels like you're in the play in to me.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so, and that would require them going 4-4 over the last 8 here, which again, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. No. There's some games in there they should win. I think to get out of the play-in, you got to at least get to above 500.
Yeah, that seems right.
And maybe to 43,
which would be 6-2. That's a pretty hot finish, but not out of the realm of possibility. It does depend on what you do on this road trip.
It's not right. This road trip sets the tone for that, obviously.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I think right now, if you're a Wolves fan, obviously you'd love to get the 6th seed, but I think the bigger priority, or not the bigger priority, but the priority you should really be circling is at least to get in that 7-8 game, and you give yourself 2 cracks at the play-in, because each play-in slot is not created equal. So. Even if you miss out on the 6th seed, getting in that 7-8 game is essential. And being the 7th seed and having that at home, also very important. So missing out on the 6th seed is not a total disappointment if you can reclaim it by getting that 7th seed, or at least getting into the 8th seed and having 2 shots at winning a playing game. I think where it becomes a little more tenuous and everybody starts getting on eggshells is if they fall to 9 or 10 and that's it. You've got 1 shot to save your season, and then you got to go and do it again.
Yeah.
After that, if you win that game. So in my mind, you got to avoid the 9 seed.
9 or 10.
I just think there's going to be, in that scenario, I just think there's so much pressure. There'll be so much pressure on this team in that 1 game scenario that I feel like I'm not sure how they would respond in that moment.
I think that seems right. I feel like 5-3 puts them in a pretty good spot. If they can win 5 of these last 8, and again, that's not easy because you get 3 quality opponents on the road right now. We don't know what's going to happen there. Last 5, though, you've got home against the Lakers next Friday, and that's, I don't know if LeBron's going to be back by then or not. I think we're going to get an update on him at some point here, but doesn't feel like he would necessarily be back by then, just based on kind of where that's trending, but maybe. And then after that, home against Portland, and Portland might be kind of out of it by that point. At Brooklyn is going to be tough, but then at San Antonio, a team that's, way at the bottom of the standings, then the back-to-back to finish the year, home against New Orleans, which could have huge implications because they're right there in the standings too. So, it does feel like if they can get through this 3-game road trip in okay shape, they could get to 41 or 42 pretty reasonably. And 42 does feel like at minimum you're going to be in the top 8.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I can't see a 42 and 40 team being the 9 or 10 seed. I think
not with all the tiebreakers they hold.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree there. So 500 or above, I think, gets them at 8 or above. I would, if I had to handicap it.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because it is so bunched up right now and things are subject to change. But like looking at it right now.
Here's the thing, Mike. Like they're up a half game on Dallas, Lakers, up a game on the Jazz. But like for instance, they're all tied in the loss column right now.
Yeah,
the Wolves have just played more games, so it's good that the Wolves have those tiebreakers over those teams. But Oklahoma City, for instance, is 1 game ahead of them in the loss column right now. So Oklahoma City could pass them by just winning their games.
Right.
So God, there's just it's so hard to figure this out. And you're watching the games every night, and when 2 of those teams play each other, it's always like, well, which one of these is better for the Wolves if they were to win if they were to win in this scenario? Like tonight, for instance, or we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, like the Clippers play the Thunder tonight. Yep. And you're like, well, if you're a Wolves fan, which team do you want to have win that game? Do you want the Clippers to fall back so maybe you have a greater chance at a top 6 seed, or do you want the Thunder to win because it gives you a little room in that 7 to 8 range?
Right.
I don't know what the right answer is to that question.
No, and it's all right there. And the Clippers again have, lost by Paul George is injured right now. So that creates an opening to catch them, as of recording. They're just a game or 2 back of the Clippers and could certainly get there. They don't have any more games left, but they have that tiebreaker. Right now, as we record, the 4 through 12 are separated by only 3 games. It's amazing. And, and I will say this, looking at the top of the West, like the Nuggets, the Grizzlies, and the Kings have definitely separated themselves. The Nuggets, by far, going to win the West, you would imagine, unless there's some kind of collapse because the Grizzlies, just don't have enough time to make that up. And the Kings, pretty close to the Grizzlies and easily in third. But Chris, in the playoffs, is there anybody in the West that truly scares you? I mean, I think the 3 best teams in the NBA are in the East this year.
Yeah, I feel like if you get into a playoff series with any of those top 3 teams, nobody's going to be scared, I feel like, of what they're facing in the first round.
No, I mean, Denver's very good. The Grizzlies we've seen have been very good, but I don't think you'd be scared of any of those matchups, right?
I don't think you would. I would not obviously want to see Denver. I just don't want to run into Jokic in a playoff series if I'm one of these teams. But Memphis, I feel like, can be beaten, and the Kings can be beaten. So,
yes.
I think if the Kings end up as a 3 seed, I think getting the 6 seed is really paramount if you want to try to actually, increase your chances of winning a playoff series. The Grizzlies at least have some playoff experience now under their belts. We'll see how kind of Ja comes back into the mix there for them, and what that looks like down the stretch here. But if you get in a 6-3 series with the Kings, you're going to be able to score on them. We know that.
Yeah.
It'll be probably a fun, entertaining up and down series. But it's a winnable series. It's not a, you look at that matchup and you're not really not frightened of it, I don't think chalk automatically goes through in the Western Conference playoffs the way it might in the East.
No, and that's the wild thing. Like, I think you look at the Wolves and you think they can finish anywhere from completely out of the top 10 and not even in the play-in to, having a legitimate chance to win a first-round series. Like, I don't think that's out of the question at this point, especially just when you look at the West. Although, Chris, I do have to imagine a couple more things. I do have to imagine that they look at some of those games they lost to the worst teams in the league and wish they could have a couple of those back right now.
Yeah, just half of them.
Yeah.
Beat Charlotte once, beat Detroit once.
Yeah.
Don't lose to Houston. That's 3 games right there where if you just win those and you could still lose the others, you'd still be in a much better position than you are right now. So if they end up missing the playoffs, or they get in the play-in and don't make the playoffs, that is the number one bullet point on their season, is that series of however many games it was, 8, 9, 10 games against those bottom rung teams of the league where they lose. I want to say that, so they lost to Detroit twice, Charlotte twice, Houston once, the Spurs twice.
Yeah.
So right there, that's 7 games against 4 of the worst teams in the league that they've lost. So, that is the story of their season if they don't make the playoffs.
It really is, because no other team in the league, other than those 4 you just mentioned, every other team has at least 30 wins. Like, those are clearly the 4 worst teams in the league. And some of it's circumstance. Sometimes a team just plays well, but I think that does show kind of the odd nature of this team. Like you said, they will win the games that you don't expect them to, and they'll lose the games that you expect them to win. And that's kind of been the story of the season. Like, I think I said this before we started recording. Like, as soon as I think that they're done, they come back and win a couple games, like they did against the Knicks today night. Like, no Cat, no Ant. Torian Prince has the most efficient night in NBA history, and then they win, right? It's like you just don't know what to expect with this team. It's been fun, but it's also been pretty dicey for anybody who's following, and especially for you covering this team.
100%. That Knicks game, I just remember thinking it's one of the crazier regular season games that I've covered in 5 years on the beat. I don't think I've ever seen a guy go for 57 and his team loses. And Torian Prince goes, 12 for 13?
Yeah,
and
8 for 8
from 3-point range. That's insanity. That game was bonkers. It really was. I don't think we truly appreciate how crazy that Knicks game was, because it was, in the moment, in the guard, it was very exciting. It was
the Knicks have been red hot. The Knicks have been one of the hottest teams in the league.
That was a hell of a win, all things considered. No Ant, no Cat that game, and it's like you need somebody, like you always think about that. It's like you need somebody to really step up in a game like that, where you're like, no Cat, no Ant. Man, it would be great if somebody just went off tonight, right?
Right.
And Torian Prince went off that particular night. If you could have pinpointed one game for Torian Prince to have the game of his life,
yeah,
that would have been it, right?
Yeah.
Not on a random game where they beat somebody by 25, but no, on the road against a good team where you absolutely needed to have him go 12 for 13 and hit all 8 of his threes, or else you don't win that game.
It's just bonkers too, because just even our conversation today hinged so much on the final 7 seconds of what happened Wednesday. If they lose that game, let's say they overturn it and say, no, that's an offensive foul on Cat, or say the possession before Atlanta makes that 3 and goes up 4, like that game's kind of over at that moment. Instead of
also officials said that they missed a foul on Sadiq Bey's putback attempt,
that's garbage. I don't believe that would have been an awful call if they'd have made that call. But yeah, they can say that. Hey, if the Wolves are going to benefit from something at the end, that'll be the first time all year they did. So, but yes, you're right. That was another moment where it could have turned it. And I'm just saying, if they're 2 games under 500 right now, 36 and 38, instead of at 500 with 2 wins in a row. Like the tone of this team totally changes just because of 7 seconds of a game. That's the West right now.
Yeah, we'd be talking more about how bad they look defensively, and
yeah,
it was a problem, and it's got to be something that they fix coming up in practice here, or at least try to fix as best as they can in practice here. I do think under the radar here, we've talked a lot about them missing Ant, missing Cat. I think you've also seen Mike Conley become more and more comfortable in what he's been doing and what they want him to do. He's become more comfortable being more aggressive and looking for his shot. Maybe this diminishes now if once Ant gets back and Cat is in the fold. But I think, early on he was trying to find his way, find his footing, in those first couple of games. But I really feel like Mike Conley's been a good addition for this group. And I think as somebody who watched D'Angelo Russell play defense for a while and now watches Mike Conley play defense on a nightly basis, the difference couldn't be more stark in terms of effort and execution.
I agree. Conley will even go in and get a rebound from time to time. I kind of like watching that from a point guard on occasion as well. That's a good point on Conley, because I think he has improved within this system. I can't remember if it was Finch or who said it the other day, but Gobert seems to have kind of a pep in his step playing with Conley. I mean, there's a familiarity there. He seems more comfortable with Conley running this offense than he did with Russell. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
And you saw like Rudy was having some of his best offensive nights of the season before Cat got back.
Right.
Cat's return changes the whole dynamic of everything that was going on before. I don't think it necessarily changes it for the worse on offense, because they were a bottom 10 offensive team
right
without him. So I always kind of dismissed the notion that this team would be better off without Cat, because it wasn't like they were exactly lighting the league on fire without him, right? They were a 500 team, right?
Yeah.
That's fine, but they could be better. And so I think, especially on the offensive end, Cat raises the ceiling of what this team can do. And you saw it last night. Offensively, they seemed to be very there was some clunky moments where, the ball maybe slowed down a little bit. But offensively, I thought they looked just fine last night. I really did.
I did too. Well, we'll see what they can do on this road trip. I'm sure we will talk again in a week or two as this thing gets down to the wire and perhaps into the postseason. Chris, good to talk to you as always. Take care. Have a good road trip, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike. Sounds good.
Good stuff as usual from Chris Hine. Hope you read that story on Karl-Anthony Towns. Like I mentioned, just a good kind of look at what evolved over the last 4 months, kind of how that process played out, and how that's not terribly uncommon for an NBA star player, and just the control of information, which way it flows. And, ultimately, whether that just kind of gets forgotten now is a good question. He's back. He contributed mightily to that win that they needed over Atlanta the other day, and they will need him down the stretch here as they play a lot of those big lineups, as they play a lot of these important games in the final 8 to try to get at least into a good play-in spot, and perhaps still to get into the playoffs, to get into the top 6 right away and not have to mess around with that. Let's finish with the cooler. I mentioned a little bit ago with Chris that Shane Albrecht had asked about what the Wild and the Wolves need to do to get into the playoffs. So we went through the Wolves kind of tick-tock game by game. The Wild is a little bit less tenuous at this point since Shane's email. The Wild's almost certainly going to get into the playoffs according to Pro Hockey Reference. Hockey Reference, they're a 99.4% chance of getting into the playoffs. So instead, I will give my take on what it's going to take for them to win the division. And they're right there with Dallas and Colorado, both of them an excellent chance to win the division still. I think it's going to take 15 points in these last 10 games. And that was the disappointment with Thursday's result. Playing Philadelphia, not a good team at all. Playing a team that they probably should have gotten 2 points against. And, that's going to happen. You're not always going to play as well as you want. But Philadelphia, one of the worst teams in the league right now. They only have 66 points. One of the lowest point totals in the whole NHL. One of the bottom 5 or 6 teams in the NHL. They get a point in the shootout, but still not able to get those 2 points. So they fall a little bit back. But I would say 15 points in these last 10, which is pretty daunting. Let's say, that means you've got to go, 6 wins and 3 overtime shootout losses, or 7 wins, 2 losses, and an overtime shootout loss. Something like that. 15 points, I think, gets you to the finish line with a division title. 15 points in 10 games is a hotter pace than they've been on over the course of the season, but kind of similar to what they've been on in this heater they've been on over the last month or so. So if they can get 15, I think they get there, but we'll see if they are able to do that. So that's my answer to that question. Almost certainly going to make the playoffs. Almost certainly going to be a top 3 team in the Central Division. Getting at least a top 2 finish in the division is important, of course, even if they come short of winning the division, because the top 2 at least get a first-round playoff game. First-round home playoff series. So we'll see what they're able to do. I think 15 is the magic number in terms of points the rest of the way. Schedule sets up that I think it's possible, but they're going to have to keep playing well. Going to have to avoid the kind of lapses. Dean Evanson did not love their game last night, so going to have to tighten up a little bit. I think they got a little loose lately, as they like to say in hockey, got a little loose, and we'll see if they're able to tighten it up in these final 10 games. That'll do it for me. Good stuff coming up next week. It's March. Everything else is happening right now. Twin season coming up. I'm sure there'll be some Vikings news, NCAA hockey, NCAA basketball, everything going on right now. So we will bring that all to you next week. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and the weekend. Be back at it again with Royce on Monday.